Have you ever caught yourself shrinking in a room full of people, holding back an opinion you actually believe in, laughing a little quieter, talking a little less, adjusting your personality in real time so nobody gets too much of the real you? If that sounds familiar, you already know what it feels like to be scared of yourself. Not scared of other people exactly. Scared of what happens if they see who you actually are, underneath all the careful adjusting. This is not shyness. Shy people still feel free to be themselves once they get comfortable. What you are doing is different. You stay adjusted even with people you have known for years, even in rooms where nobody is judging you. The fear does not go away with familiarity. That tells you something important. This is not about the room. It is about you. About a belief you have been carrying for a long time that says the real you is somehow not safe to show. And that belief did not arrive on its own. Beliefs like that do not form out of nothing. They form from specific moments. A reaction that landed wrong. A silence that followed something you said with too much excitement. A look on someone's face that told you, instantly and clearly, that you had shown too much. You probably do not remember the exact moment anymore, but your body remembers the rule it built from it. Be smaller, be safer, be less of this. Carl Jung wrote about something he called the persona, the mask a person builds so the world will accept them. He warned that some people become so attached to that mask that they forget there is a face underneath it. That is exactly where you are. The version of you that is loud enough, agreeable enough, easy enough to never cause a problem. That is not your personality. That is your protection. And you built it so early that you stopped noticing it was even there. Here is the truth nobody told you. Hiding who you are is not a personality trait. It is something you learned. Somewhere, at some point, being fully yourself cost you something. Maybe you got laughed at for something you cared about. Maybe you got told you were too much, too loud, too sensitive, too weird. Maybe you watched someone else get rejected for being different and quietly decided you would never let that happen to you. That decision did not feel like a decision at the time. It felt like survival. You were not thinking strategically about it. You were just protecting yourself the only way you knew how, by becoming smaller, by becoming whatever version of you got the least amount of pushback. And it worked, in a way. You stopped getting laughed at. You stopped getting rejected. But you also stopped being seen. And those two things came as a package deal you never agreed to, but accepted anyway. Think about what you actually hide, not just opinions, things that feel embarrassingly specific to you, the way you really talk when you are excited about something, the interests you do not bring up because you assume people will think they are strange, the version of your humor that is a little too weird for most rooms, the things you actually believe that go against what everyone around you seems to believe. All of that gets folded up and put away before you walk into most spaces. And it is not just put away once. It gets put away every single time. In every new room, with every new person. The folding becomes so automatic that you do not even register it as work anymore. But it is work. Constant, invisible work. Scanning the room before you have even said a word. Calculating how much of yourself is allowed here. Adjusting before anyone has given you a single reason to think you need to. You do this so often, it has started to feel like just being polite. It is not politeness. Politeness is choosing kindness. This is something closer to bracing. Bracing for a reaction that has not happened yet, based on a reaction that happened a long time ago to a completely different person in a completely different room. You are not actually responding to the people in front of you most of the time. You are responding to people from years ago who are not even there anymore. The room changed. The rule did not. And here is what that costs you that you probably have not added up yet. Every time you hide a piece of yourself, you are also hiding the chance for someone to actually love that piece. You cannot get rejected for something you never showed, but you also cannot get accepted for it either. You have traded the possibility of being truly known for the guarantee of never being truly seen. That trade might feel safer. It is not. It is just slower at hurting you. People who hide themselves chronically are not lying about who they are exactly. It is more specific than that. They are presenting an incomplete version and calling it the whole thing. And over time, even they start to believe the incomplete version is accurate. They stop being able to tell the difference between who they actually are and who they have been performing for so long. Ask them what they really think, and they genuinely hesitate. Not because they are being cautious, because they are not totally sure anymore. That confusion is the real cost. Not embarrassment, not awkwardness, erasure. You can spend so many years managing how you come across that the actual you, the one underneath all that management, gets quieter and quieter until you cannot hear it clearly anymore. People talk about losing themselves like it is a dramatic event. It is not. It is thousands of small choices, made one at a time, over years, until one day you look up and realize you do not fully know who you are without an audience to perform for. Jung also talked about something he called the shadow. The parts of yourself that you decide are unacceptable and push down out of sight. For most people who are scared to be themselves, the shadow is not something dark or shameful. It is just the parts of them that got rejected once. The intensity, the weirdness, the bluntness, the big feelings. None of that is actually bad. It just got treated as bad by someone, somewhere, and you believed them without ever checking if they were right. And once something goes into the shadow, it does not just sit there quietly. It leaks. It shows up as resentment toward people who are allowed to be themselves freely. It shows up as exhaustion after spending time around people, because performing is tiring in a way that being real never is. It shows up as a strange flatness, a sense that nothing fully excites you anymore, because excitement requires a kind of openness you have trained yourself out of in almost every situation you walk into. That flatness is one of the most overlooked symptoms of this whole thing. People assume hiding yourself just means feeling shy or quiet. It is heavier than that. It is the slow draining of color out of your own experience. Things stop feeling as funny. Music stops hitting the same way. Even good days feel muted, like you are watching them through glass instead of actually living inside them. That is what happens when you train yourself to feel less, so that showing less feels easier. Here is something that needs to be said directly. The people who rejected the real you when you were younger were often working from their own small, limited version of what was acceptable. A parent who could not handle big emotions because their own were never allowed either. Classmates repeating whatever made them feel powerful that week. None of that was actually a verdict on you. It was a verdict on what those specific people were capable of handling at that specific time in their own limited lives. But you took it as a verdict on you. Because you were a kid, and kids do not have the tools to separate someone else's limitation from their own worth. You just absorbed the message. Be less of this. Be more of that. And you built an entire way of moving through the world around messages that were never actually about your value. They were about other people's comfort. You have been organizing your whole life around other people's comfort for years without realizing that is what you were doing. And here is the part that is genuinely hard to hear. Some of the people in your life right now only know the adjusted version. They like you. They might even love you. But they are responding to a performance, not to you. That is not their fault. You never gave them the chance to respond to anything else. Which means some of what feels like connection in your life right now might actually be connection to a character you built a long time ago to keep yourself safe. That is not a comfortable thing to realize. It means some of the approval you have collected over the years was never really for you. It was for the mask, and no amount of approval for the mask will ever feel like enough, because some quiet part of you always knows the difference. You can be liked constantly and still feel completely unseen. Those two things are not opposites. They happen to the same person all the time, often without anyone around them ever noticing. You cannot build a real life out of a fake version of yourself. You can build a comfortable one, a manageable one where conflict is rare and people generally seem to like you. But comfortable and real are not the same thing. And at some point, usually quietly, usually in a moment you do not expect, the gap between the comfortable life and the real one starts to feel unbearable. That gap has a name. Most people just call it emptiness and never trace it back to its actual source. Its actual source is you. Specifically, the years you have spent making yourself smaller so other people would have an easier time accepting you. You did not get smaller because you are small. You got smaller because somewhere along the way you decided that taking up less space was the price of being allowed to stay. That price has been getting paid every single day since, often without you noticing the transaction was even happening in the background of your life. And the strange thing about this kind of cost is that it never sends a bill all at once. It takes a little here, a little there, a muted reaction, a swallowed opinion, a laugh held back. None of it feels significant in the moment. It is only when you add it all up across years that you see the actual size of what has been quietly taken from you. By then, it does not feel like a series of small choices anymore. It feels like just who you are. It is not. It never was. Jung's answer to a life spent behind the mask was something he called individuation. The slow work of becoming who you actually are instead of who you learn to perform. He did not describe it as a single moment of transformation. He described it as a long, often uncomfortable confrontation with the parts of yourself you have spent years avoiding. There is no shortcut through that. There is only the long way, walked one honest moment at a time. And the honest moments are smaller than people expect. A real reaction instead of a performed one. An actual opinion instead of the safe, agreeable version. A laugh that comes from something actually being funny instead of from the room expecting one. None of these moments look dramatic from the outside. From the inside, the first few feel enormous. That gap between how small they look and how big they feel tells you exactly how long you have been holding all of this in. Expect the body to react before the mind catches up. A tightness in the chest. The urge to immediately soften what you just said. That reaction is not telling you the truth about what is actually happening right now. It is repeating a lesson from years ago, one that said showing too much leads to something bad. The lesson is old. It is reacting to a room that no longer exists, full of people who are not standing in front of you anymore. Some people will like the real you less than they like the performance. That will happen, and it is not proof that the real you is the problem. It is proof that those particular people were only ever responding to the version you built for them specifically. Losing that kind of approval will hurt the way losing anything familiar hurts. But it answers a question that the performance was always designed to avoid. Which relationships in your life can actually hold the whole of you, and which ones never could? The people who stay when the performance stops. The ones who can sit with your bluntness, your intensity, your strange interests, your actual opinions without flinching. Those are the only people who were ever connected to you in the first place. Everyone else was connected to the character. That is not a comfortable thing to sit with. It means some relationships you valued for years were never really about you at all. They were about a version of you that no longer has to exist. You were taught, somewhere along the way, that the real you was too much for this world to handle. That was never true. It was true for a few specific people in a few specific moments who could not handle it. That is a much smaller fact than the rule you built out of it. You took a handful of limited reactions from limited people and turned it into a permanent law about who you are allowed to be for the rest of your life. And laws like that do not announce themselves as laws. They just feel like the way things are, like personality, like preference, like just who you happen to be. That disguise is what makes them so hard to question. Nobody questions something that feels like the truth about themselves. But this was never the truth about you. It was a rule built by a frightened kid trying to survive a handful of bad moments. The kid did a good job. The rule outlived its purpose a long time ago. You are not too much. You were just around people at certain moments who were too limited to hold you. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should, because one version of that sentence is about you, and the other version, the true one, was never about you at all.